So if you're someone who works in an environment that isn't very accessible to deaf employees, or if you're someone hearing or deaf, honestly, it doesn't really matter. If you're someone who has a lot of hearing privilege and you want to learn how to unpack that and just be more deaf friendly, then this video is going to be for you. Today I'm partnering with Nikki Integrated Networking Consultants because a woman there, Nikki, the CEO, has actually talked to me about some courses that she's created for people to help with making things more inclusive around the workplace and honestly just in general in life. This company's goal is like many other advocates' goal, even the goals that I have myself. We want to make sure that accessibility is across the board. We want to make sure people can advocate for themselves, have self-esteem when they're growing up, because this society that we live in is not the most disability friendly, the most deaf friendly. We want people to be more educated when it comes to deaf people. So I got the opportunity to take some of the courses. The first and newest one being creating inclusive environments for deaf and hard of hearing. So this one was more about like in the work environment. I've been very open about my difficulty with having a normal job. When you're a senior in high school, your teachers are preparing you for going to college and or getting a job, and the advice that they had to give was more suitable for my hearing peers. I was the only deaf person in the class, and I had been job searching for so long, only got one interview, it never went beyond that, and now I'm on a search again, and it's been difficult, and I've been working with VR to try to help make that happen. I'm not entirely sure if the Creating Inclusive Environments course is live at the moment, but it should be in the works of having been done so. The other one that I had originally taken a look at was the Unpacking Hearing Privilege, and this can be for the hearing folk as much as the deaf folk, because as somebody who grew up mainstreamed and only had one other deaf person I knew, who was my mother, who was not the greatest person in the world, I definitely had some hearing-headed biases growing up before I finally had enough, and I wanted to learn more about deaf people in the deaf community and try to find some sort of identity, because growing up the hearing way clearly wasn't working very well. But that course tells you about autism and some backstory with deaf history and deaf oppression, the Milan Conference of 1880, Alexander Graham Bell, that type of thing. It's a lot to learn about, and if you don't know it already, it's definitely something that's going to be opening your eyes up a little bit more. So with these courses, of course, you are going to be learning about some stuff. You're going to be learning about deaf history, deaf culture. You're going to be learning about how to make things more accessible. You're going to be learning about how to unpack your hearing privilege. But there are some assignments at the end. There are quizzes, so we got to make sure you've paid attention in class, right? And there are little essays that you write, one essay at the end of each part of the chapter or the course. What I also like about these courses is that they have audio with them, so voiceover, a screen reader. So if you're blind, low vision, visually impaired, you can take these courses. They will be accessible to you. I tested them out myself with my hearing aids. It works. And with the Unpacking Hearing Privileges course, there are some essays that I want to read to you so you get an idea of what people ended up learning by the end of this. One of the questions is, how has your hearing privilege influenced your communication with deaf individuals? And this person's answer is, my hearing privilege has led me to unintentional assumptions about deaf people's abilities or needs, such as assuming they can lip read perfectly or communicate effectively through spoken language. This has resulted in awkward social encounters and even unintentional exclusion from conversations when a deaf and hard of hearing interpreter is not present in the room. That is probably the biggest assumption when it comes to deaf people. As you know, or you may not know if you're brand new here, if this is your first video, hi. But again, I grew up mainstream. I grew up speaking English. I didn't have access to ASL until my early 20s, and I'm still learning. I'm still very, very slowly trying to get to that fluency. Back then, when I was younger, when I was a child, my hearing was better than it is now. I did need hearing aids back then, but we just couldn't afford them. But you know, because I was speaking since I was a child, since what's the average age that kids start speaking, right? 2, 3, I don't know. But I was speaking the same age that everybody else started speaking. So people would look at me and I would bluff my way through. I would attempt to lip read. I'm very, very bad at lip reading. But the media, when you watch things like Switched at Birth, at least with Daphne's character, you see her as being this like unicorn lip reader, and just any other kind of media in general, you're seeing deaf people, these characters, suddenly know how to lip read from far away and very up close. We are not all Sue Thomas from the FBI. That woman had talent. We don't all have that talent, I certainly don't. But people would assume that I could just lip read them every time I'm going to somebody, right? And I'm asking them, hey, I'm deaf, can you type? Even if I have it written down on my phone, so I'm going completely voice off, people are still assuming that I can lip read. And hearing people don't want to put in the effort to making communication equal, not even halfway a lot of the time. Another answer from somebody else to that question: my hearing privilege has influenced my communication with deaf individuals by assuming everyone could read lips, have access, and choose to use a cochlear implant. That's another thing, not every deaf person has cochlear implants or has hearing aids. Some people choose not to have them, some people do not actually qualify for these things. Sometimes, especially if you get like a cochlear implant, that requires surgery, and it's not even a guarantee to work when you get that surgery. It's still a guessing game, right? So you could get the surgery, you could be waiting until you have to activate it, and it doesn't actually work out for you, and then that's a lot of money down the drain. Another common misconception is that when we do have hearing aids or cochlear implants or both, that suddenly means that, oh, our hearing is cured, like we have a hearing back and we can understand every syllable, every word in a sentence. We can understand people from across the room. Not the case. Have my hearing aids made sound louder? Of course. Has it made communication easier, oral communication? Yes. Has it made it perfect? No, because I still have trouble understanding some people. I still have to ask people to repeat themselves sometimes. I still need ASL interpreters or captions when going to conferences or meetings or consuming media. Cochlear implants and hearing aids are hearing assistive devices. They are not cures. They will not fix things. They help. One question says, reflect on a time when you may have unintentionally excluded an individual with a hearing loss from a conversation or activity. How could you have handled the situation differently? And this person responds, when I became aware that an individual could not hear me, I could have asked them specifically what might make it easier for them. It would have been much more respectful. And that is very, very true. If you know someone is deaf, you want to ask them what their accommodation, what their access needs are. Because two deaf people, you know, you might have me and Bob over here, you know, Demon Bob, Deaf Demon Bob. Deaf Demon Bob here is a little bit more fluent in sign language than me, right? He's always gonna want that ASL interpreter. Me, English is my first language, so typically, if it's not a casual type of setting, if it's more, I don't know, something about science, about math, it's just something more complicated than just having a conversation, I'm going to need captions more watching a video about said complicated topic, right? Because I am not fluent in ASL and I don't know I do not know a lot of scientific, mathematical, complicated terms in ASL yet, right? Because it's never really come up in conversation, so I haven't quite gone to learn those yet. But in English, okay, granted, I still might not understand it. I probably won't. I won't understand it so much in English either, but I'm gonna be able to read the word with my eyeballs, and it'll be a little bit more easier than seeing a sign and I have like no context to go with it, and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here. People have assumed accommodation needs when I've gone to conferences, festivals, things like that. If I'm asking for an ASL interpreter, someone will be like, oh, why can't we just give you captions, or you don't need any of that, right? Because you speak, right? And that's simply not how that works. In these courses, there's stuff about like language deprivation, which is keeping language from deaf individuals if you only put them in English classrooms instead of maybe having them try ASL to get them more accessibility and just more knowledge in language. There are questions with that, so people will talk about how language deprivation affects the cognitive development of deaf individuals and things like that. So you're really getting into the science, the health of it all, and then you're getting into the social stuff. So you're learning quite a little bit of everything. And this course is going to make sure that you know that and that you paid attention. The good thing about these courses is that you can go about your own pace, right? They do have videos, they're very short videos, and then you are not timed when you're doing the quizzes or when you're doing your assignment. When I asked Nikki how long it would take to do these courses, some people did them in a day, some people did them in a week. If you're like me and you fell on a sidewalk and was very badly injured in your face and knee, it took you about 2 months to get through it. Because, you know, it's 2024, people are busy, people have to work. You might have time to do a little module here and there. You might have time to do 1.1 and 1.2, but you don't have time to do the entire first or second chapter, right? So you can go at your own pace. You don't have to worry about being stressed out about that. I really do think, I hope that courses like these that are short, they're easy to understand, they're not super complicated, right? I think it would do, and I hope it would do, a lot of good for hearing people, deaf people, literally anybody who wants to learn more about the history, learn how to unpack privilege, so that we can continue making a change. Because yes, the ADA was established, it was signed into law in 1990. However, it's very easy to skip around that just with some little loopholes that you can make up, right? As much as it has gotten better in places, we are in a political climate right now. I know somebody's gonna try to bring up, oh my gosh, she's bringing politics in. All of this literally is political. There's no way around it. But we are in a political climate right now where this stuff is being threatened. Again, it's always being threatened, let's be honest. Deaf schools being closed, etc., etc., having issues in the health industry. It's being threatened every day. But the current climate right now is just making that even more of a threat, and it's concerning, and there's still a whole lot to learn even in 2024. And I'm hoping that we get to hearing people, we get anybody on board. It can't just be deaf people, disabled people constantly working on trying to make a change. Because let's be honest, a whole lot of people don't like to listen to us. But if we have the backup, if we have the allies, the more that we have, hopefully the easier that it's going to be to spread the knowledge, to spread the awareness, and we get more voices in to help us make sure that we still get the accessibility we need. People will be more respectful towards us in making sure that we get the accessibility that we need, or literally just in casual everyday environment. Because I would love to stop being yelled at in the supermarket when I can't hear somebody behind me because they're saying excuse me. So I'll have a link to these courses down below. I don't think they're too expensive. I'm looking at the Creating Inclusive Environments for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Employees, Customers, and Patients one right now, and it says $40 American. I'm not sure what the other ones are, but I imagine it's going to be around that same cost. So not too bad. I know of other courses, especially on Coursera and stuff, that it's definitely a little bit more expensive. This looks good. So give it a try and let me know what you think. And I want to say thank you to Nikki for coming with me about this, and I'm going to look at even more courses available because there's a couple that I haven't looked at quite yet. But those two that I talked about were the main ones that we were talking about that we wanted to bring up and really push out there to the public. So again, thank you for working with me on this. I appreciate it. Let me know if any of you are interested in this stuff down below in the comments. For more conversation about deafness, disability, etc., be sure to subscribe to the channel. I do have a Patreon page where more stuff gets talked about on there, more content. I appreciate you watching this video. Thank you, and I will see you later.